It's time for a Humans in Tune conversation with Darren on 93.9 Mike FM.
Hey, friends, we are back at it. Another Humans in Tune conversation here on 93.9 Mike FM on Facebook and on our podcast if you're catching it after the fact. It is National Teacher Appreciation Week this week, and all of us can safely say we had a teacher in our life that we appreciate. And today is actual National Teacher Appreciation Day. And so this was a conversation I scheduled a while back. Growing up as the son of a teacher, a mom who taught English in high school and college, and I watched the long hours and late nights and high stress of becoming a teacher in a public school system, and watched that happen for her and, you know, the things she tried to do to deal with that stress and manage things. Teachers have a lot of weight to carry, and so I'm excited today to have Jen Rafferty on the show with me. Jen, welcome to Humans in Tune and 93.9 Mike FM.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You bet. It is a pleasure to have you. Like I said, I grew up as the son of a teacher. A lot of my friends from college are teachers, you know, and they carry a heavy weight. No matter what subject you're teaching, you've got after hours grading to handle. You've got, maybe you're the sponsor for the dance team. You've got to go to practice every day, or you're coaching too. Teachers wear many, many hats, and a lot of times they're just jammed on their head, right? So, teaching is an incredible environment to live in. It's super rewarding. There's a lot to it, but that stress, that anger, that frustration with how things are not working for you in this classroom or with administration, all that stuff can build up and really affect what the teacher brings to the classroom. So, Jen, you see the Empowered Educator logo here on her page. This is Jen's website, and I'd encourage you guys to check it out after the fact. Hit empowerededucator.com to learn more. But, Jen, you come from a teaching background as well, right?
I do. Yep. I taught for about 15 years in the Central New York public schools as a music teacher, mostly middle school, but
Okay.
I taught choir and general music. We learned how to play guitar and bass and drums. We did all sorts of things. And I loved it. I really thought that I was going to do that my entire life. I knew I always wanted to be a music teacher. It was like a calling for me, like it is for so many educators. Yeah. And, COVID really changed everything for me. I think because of the work that I do, some people assume that it was because of burnout, which is the reason why I left. And it actually wasn't. I was ready to do it my entire career. And I observed a lot of teachers around me feeling overwhelmed and burnout. I certainly felt overwhelmed and stress. I did, though, looking back, think that that level of stress and frustration, like you were just describing as you were introducing me, I thought that was normal. And I thought very much like, well, you know, it is what it is. This is kind of my lot in life for the choices that I've made. And what I've come to realize through not only my work, but through the research that we do here in Empowered Educator and our clients that we support, that there's actually other options, that you don't have to live your life and teach with that consistent state of stress and overwhelm and frustration, which is, I think, why it's so important to talk about, especially this week during Teacher Appreciation Week.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And it's not something that's top of mind for, you know, I have two kids. I've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old in 7th and 9th grade, respectively. And, you know, I don't think about the stress level of my kids' teachers. You know, I don't think about that consciously as a parent. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a lot of support coming from the parents of students to make sure those teachers are feeling well too. So they've really got to find their place, you know, within what they're doing. COVID really changed the game for you.
Yeah, COVID changed everything. You know, I was teaching choir, and at the time when COVID happened, singing itself was very dangerous. You know, that was quite literally killing people. And so, you know, being somebody who's made their identity really depend on a lot of who I was as a teacher, as a music educator, as a choir director. All of a sudden, you know, everything changed for for everybody overnight. And figuring out how to navigate that space was challenging for everybody, of course. But in addition to all of that, in my personal life, there were a lot of things that changed. My husband and I at the time decided to get a divorce, and I had moved out with my kids who were 5 and 7 at the time, that same weekend that the world shut down in March of 2020. And so not only was I going through this professional identity crisis, there was very much this personal identity crisis where I had to ask myself, and along with a lot of other people who were going through this personal identity crisis too, because our work was so connected to our identity. You know, who am I? You know, this question, who am I? Who did I want to be? And when I realized there was kind of a big gap in between those two places, I took it upon myself to kind of go on my own healing journey. I really dove into the research of mindset and emotional intelligence. I started my PhD in educational psychology. And when the time came to decide whether or not I wanted to go back to school in 2020, I had decided to stay home, which was what I thought would just be a semester to homeschool my kids. And I realized, you know what, I think I'm going to stay home because there's something else that I feel like teachers really need and they're not able to get. And in order to build that bridge for myself, I felt that there was something there to help teachers bridge that bridge for themselves too. And so Empowered Educator was born. And so now we serve teachers, school leaders, parents, office staff, and we focus on the social emotional well-being of all of the adults in schools.
That's fascinating. That's huge because you're right. You did identify that gap. That gap was there before COVID, and that gap's still there, right, for everybody. That is something that will survive a pandemic for sure. Is that lack of being able to support yourself in that role. So this was born of this, and you stepped into this role, and obviously, you saw an opportunity for yourself to take what you had learned and then provide that for these people, and that's what gave birth to Empowered Educator. So now you're working with teachers. You're still based in New York, right?
So yeah, we're based in New York, but what was kind of cool about this was we started during COVID, so it was an online entity, and it still is.
Yeah.
So, yes, we do a lot of in-person. Yeah, we do a lot of in-person trainings and in-person workshops. And of course, I love to be with other people in real life. And, we all know that once we've kind of lived this life in this virtual world, it really opened up doors to more possibility and potential for connection and learning and growth and community that we didn't realize was there before. So most of what we do still is virtual just because people want it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a convenience to it, right? And if you're not traveling, you're not spending money on hotels and gas and all that stuff too. So, it makes just more sense logistically, but then also how many more people are you able to service because you can set something up where, 5 minutes later, hey, we're going to jump on a conversation with this person now instead of a 20-minute ride across town or whatever the case might be. And you're right. That knocks down the borders. You're able to help people. We're here in Southeast Missouri. You can help anybody out along the route, with this. And I'm going to say as somebody who finds that identity, it would be like an athlete, a pitcher breaking his arm, right? Well, what the hell do I do now? Step up and coach. What do I do? So it's cool to see that you found yourself at this point where, the rug had kind of been pulled out a little bit and you were able to say, okay, well, my next step is going to be to better myself and improve upon that. And then to spin this is really cool. I guess what's, as far as, within the education system, what do you think is the biggest common thread you see between teachers that you guys get in touch with?
That's a really great question. The biggest common thread that we see has everything to do with people abdicating their power and not realizing that there is so much agency and so much choice that we have in every single moment. And it's so easy to kind of just scream out into the abyss and, shout from the rooftops about all of the things that are wrong. And don't get me wrong, there are major problems within the infrastructure of school systems, 100%.
It is not a perfect environment.
We are kind of screaming out Right. No, it's not for anybody. We know this, right?
Right.
But when we're just kind of screaming out about it, and pointing fingers as, to administration or the community or the policy or the politicians, then we abdicate our power. And we don't have any, we forget that you are actually an agent for change.
You're more than a
And so
wheel
what
or a
we
gear on the
do,
wheel, right? That's it.
yes, 100%. So what we do is we show people the way to their own agency again, where they reconnect to their own agency to feel empowered to decide, well, how do I want to show up? Yes, things aren't great. Yes, things are not the way that I had hoped that they would be when I first came into this profession. And instead of pointing fingers, which isn't working, by the way,
No.
how do I show up in this
All that
moment?
happens is they
Right?
point
It's just
back.
not, right?
Yeah.
Right. How do I show up in this moment to align with who I need to be to advocate for myself, for the profession, for my students, and for my communities? And when we the one last thing I'm going to say about this, because I can go off quite a long
Right?
time.
No.
If
Eat it
we
up. I love it.
want our students, right? When we if we want our students to know their self-worth, we as educators need to know ours.
Absolutely.
And it starts by reclaiming that agency in every single moment of the day, especially when it feels hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. That when it's hardest, that's when you got to grab the hardest. That's absolutely right. Definitely a direct relationship.
Yeah.
There. And really, and we're celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week, and shout out to all my teachers that are, I'm on the backside of 50, so some of them RIP, but I've got a lot of great teachers still here around with me. Matter of fact, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago and had one of my old teachers come up and we chatted about those old days. And, it's impressive to see, the impression, but you're right. If we're not, the kids reflect what we're doing, just like really with any type of job where you embed yourself into something. I'm sure that if you're doing a presentation and you're feeling off, their takeaway is going to be dented or bruised by how you present yourself. And so, presenting yourself as in control and empowered and able to, take that leadership role in your own teaching career, that's huge for those kids. Confidence, especially those middle school kids and junior high kids, holy crud. They're at that age where it's awkward smells and some maturing, some not. It's like a little circus tent. So that is a huge time of impression for those kids.
Yeah, it is. And we forget we're so focused on outputs. We're focused on,
the numbers,
in New York
the marks,
right now,
right? Yeah.
as we speak. Right, as we speak, my kids right now who are in fourth grade and sixth grade, they're taking state tests right now.
Yep.
So like we look at the test scores, we look at the graduation rates, we look at the attrition of teachers. But what we forget is that those outputs are all a result of what we're putting in as inputs, and we're not focusing on inputs. And this is what we actually need to be looking at, is creating more of a fertile ground for everybody to thrive instead of pointing at the problem and then trying to fix the problem by looking at the problem.
Yeah.
We need to start looking over here.
And this is something I'm sure you could jump on a giant diatribe about as well. But when a scholastic system becomes almost a manufacturing entity and loses that humanity side of it, and it's just about the numbers and the graduation rates and these kind of things, it's almost like you're maintaining a quota for a call center or a manufacturing plant, right? So I think it starts with everybody remembering this is a human product. I mean, we are literally planting the seed in these minds of these young kids and, bringing up the next ones that you're going to hire in 15 years to take my spot when I retire, right? So that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to speak on that for a second, because you're right, Darren. The school system as we know it today hasn't really changed much since the days that it started 100 years ago now, where, it was created during the Industrial Revolution, where that was its purpose, to like pump out other people who were going to go work into factory. We all know this. This isn't a secret, right? But if you think about the evolution of a car, if you think about the evolution of the telephone, if you think about the evolution of how we get and deliver mail, okay? And now you think of what a school looks like. from over 100 years ago to what it looks like now, things haven't really changed much. And what I'm seeing is there's a lot of effort now, especially post-COVID, to focus on the whole child, to focus on the social emotional well-being of the people who come into schools. But often what I'm seeing and what a lot of teachers have experienced is very much like other professional development of, well, we did it. We checked the box. We did the thing. Here's the social emotional learning curriculum. And is everyone being kind today? Great. Gold star for you. And then we can continue on with our serious work. Right. And so what we do here that is different is create community, create scaffold, create long-term support. So it's not this, I can come in and do a really awesome keynote for you. That's great. And you all can walk out feeling super inspired.
Sure.
But 2 weeks from now, when things get really hard, you're going to forget everything I said and go back to the way that you've been doing it because that's our biology.
Yeah. We fall back into the comfortable rut.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's what you're supposed to do because when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze, that stress state, we're going to go back to what feels normal, even if it's not serving us. So what we do here is give you that, a little bit of handholding. What that support looks like is very high touch because if we want change, organizations don't change until people change. And so we need to have that human connection to support the change that people actually want to see.
Absolutely. With this, you're working with teachers, you're working with administrators, you're working with parents, really just everybody across the board, right?
Yeah, well, it has to be, right? As you were saying before, we're kind of, we as the adults in these spaces influence our kids. And it's so easy to tell our kids what to do. But you have kids. How often do they actually listen to what you have to say?
Yeah, you cross your fingers and hope for the best. Yeah.
Right. But if you show up differently, if who you are is different, those are the messages that they're actually getting. You can shout kindness all you want, but if you're, on the other end talking to your phone on the phone and complaining and gossiping about this, that, and the other thing, there's an incongruence about what you're saying and who you're being.
Yeah.
And so as the adults, we need to walk the walk. It is not enough to just say what needs to happen. We are in the business of making generational change here.
We can't use that. Do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't fly because they're watching. They're absorbing everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everything. So if we work with the teachers, the administrators, the paraprofessionals, the office staff, and the parents first, before we even work with the kids, they are set up for success because the adults in their life are actually embodying what it means to be in congruence, to be an adult that has alignment with that bridge of who they are and who they want to be and show up that way every single day as best they can.
Now, when we think of, let's just say somebody's watching this or listening on the podcast right now and they're teaching and, they're dealing with these environments and the vast majority probably are. They've got some headaches up the ladder or down the ladder or across the board or whatever the case might be. What's their first step? Because honestly, if I was a teacher and I listen to this conversation, I'm like, yeah, this sounds really awesome because my administrator's a pain in my neck. And boy, if we could start there and just keep working downhill, everything would be great. In the realistic sense of the world, if they make that call and say, I need you to talk to somebody for me. So, how do they get the ball rolling? How do they start making the change that they want to see in their school?
So that's a great question. And I'm going to say two things about this. The first one is the change has to start with you. It is not enough to be like, hey, it'd be really great if my administrator would just change everything about the way they did things. And finally, I'd be happy.
Come around to where I want to be, right?
Right. Right. That's not going to happen. That is abdicating your power.
That's how you get that way in the first place, right? As the administrator says, it's going to be my way or the highway. And
Exactly. So what the change has to start with you. And what I always suggest, first thing, like if you're listening to this and you're like, what do I do, Jen? You have an opportunity to pause throughout your day to make more conscious decisions. Because what we're doing here is we're raising our consciousness. We're getting rid of the default. We're getting rid of the autopilot. And we're actually going to be in the driver's seat of your life. And what that means is you have an opportunity now to pause throughout your day. So I always recommend doing 4 breathing breaks throughout the day.
Okay.
And like, I know breathing breaks doesn't change the world. I get it. No, that's ridiculous. But what you are doing, like I said, is raising your consciousness. So you get to have an opportunity to be like, wait, what was I thinking right there? Oh, that's so interesting. My shoulders wanted to be earrings all of a sudden. I didn't even realize. Oh, that's so weird. Like my stomach was in knots and it didn't even occur to me until this moment when I paused. So what I suggest is in the car before you get out of your car in the morning, like when your car's in the parking lot.
After they're done listening to us on the morning show.
That's right. Listen first. One time during lunch or a prep period, or if you're like, I work through my lunch and prep period, do it in the bathroom. Once in the parking lot before you go home, and then one other time before dinner, and put your hand to your heart, close your eyes, and just take 3 deep breaths. And what that's going to do is calm your nervous system down for a moment so it's not activated in that stress state, and raise your awareness to how you're feeling so you can make an informed and empowered choice about how you actually want to feel.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of your question.
I love that.
And then how to get
It's
the
a
ball
conscious
rolling.
stop.
Yeah, it's a conscious stop because your day happens during the day and we're wired to be on autopilot. So if you
we're
are
reactive all day long. I mean, that's how you get through it, right?
all day long. And so if your nervous system, if your mind body knows, oh, work gives me stress. I know that work gives me stress because I talk about it all the time because that's all I'm thinking about. On the weekends when I should be home with my family, I'm all of a sudden thinking about all the stress about work. Oh, we're going to work. I know what we need to do. We need to fill up with cortisol because that's what we do here. So your nervous system is running on a program that you've designed, whether by default or not.
Or we are our own Pavlovian reflex, right? Pretty much.
Exactly. And so much of this happens in our subconscious. And we just say to ourselves, well, it is what it is. You know, I'm supposed to feel stress and overwhelm and pressure because that's teaching. That's being an administrator.
Right.
But it's not. It doesn't have to be.
That's the key. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yes, it doesn't have to be that way. And if we're working with children, especially Darren, like what are the models that they are seeing in the adults that they're watching every day? You know, this perpetually living in stress and overwhelm and frustration. So, you know, how do we get the ball rolling? You get to start first. And this little teeny tiny shift is going to be a huge crack in what is possible for you. So if you can't remember, set an alarm. I still have my breathing alarms on my phone that will go off.
Yep.
I will stop. I will put my hands to my heart and I will take a breath because I also practice everything that I teach. So that's I think
it's important. I mean, if you're not putting it into practice, you just might as well be asking for my money or something, you know.
Right. I mean, and these practices that we share here at Empowered Educator, everyone practices them. That is a part of the integrity of the program. If you are a practitioner, you practice.
Yeah.
That's just how this goes, right?
Term there, kids.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And so this is the stuff that got me from, you know, that weekend in March of 2020, sobbing my eyes out, not sure what I was going to do with my life, to 18 months later, owning this company and being on the TEDx stage. Like, this is how I did it. Yep. And because the person that I was sitting on the couch is not the person who you're talking to right now. And in order to make those changes, I had to be conscious about it, which meant I had to understand what my nervous system was going through, what was stressing me out, when it was stressing me out, and regain my agency so I can make new choices. Yeah.
I mean, we are a lot more in tune to the mental side of that mental health, that stress, versus the physiological side of it. There are physical things that happen when you're that stressed out. And if you find those things, you know, as a trigger, that you need to be aware of those things that trigger you as well. And honestly, you know, I'm not in a teacher role, but I am in a role of a position that I love and embed myself in 100% and don't pay attention to the clock. You just work because you love what you do and you want to do the best you can. So, you know, this applies across the board. This could be, you know, Joe corporate, or this could be, you know, the third grade teacher down the hall. So it really is a good practice to give yourself that conscious break, that time to breathe, to analyze, and to just give yourself some grace. That's just so huge. And my mom, you know, she'd beat herself up about getting essays graded and stuff. And English teachers, it's tough, man. There's a lot of words, you know, and this is the analog days of a lot of those things too. But, to be able to give yourself that grace. It's going to avoiding burnout is another thing. I mean, we talk about the stress of just your day to day, and you want to teach. But there is nothing worse for a kid than a teacher that has just lost their will to pour into it. And so this is so important for them to grab a hold of that, embrace what you're doing, and just to reach out, and get these tips and have this conversation and start, like you said, start at that root level with yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And it is a labor of love. Mm-hmm. And what happens is people develop these relationships with their work where it's starting to get to that point of burnout. That it becomes this. This is gonna be maybe a little radical to say, but if this is what's coming up for me, it becomes this abusive relationship where I love my work, but it's killing me.
Right.
But I love it. So I keep coming back. And so again, kind of coming back to, what we do here is we teach educators to regain their agency so they can show up in this relationship as their best selves.
As the person they were when they started and had the glow in their eyes and all the hope in their heart. Yeah.
Yes. And that's exactly what they need you to be.
That never dies within you as a teacher. It just gets piled upon and smothered. And so you have to uncover that, and you have to bring that out and give it fresh air and give it sunlight, just like you'd recap a plant or something,
Yeah,
so
exactly like you do. Right. Yeah, you do. Not waiting for somebody else to do it for you.
Somebody else isn't going to reach in and pull that crud out. You've got to dig deep.
Yeah, you do. So to answer the second part of your question, how do we get the ball rolling?
Yeah.
Well, the easiest thing is to go to my website, which is empowerededucator.com. Yeah. And there are a ton of free resources on there. So you can check out any of those things, including beginner meditations. There's Beat the Burnout worksheet that you can do. There's something that we created called the Dopa menu, which is how to get dopamine in different places that aren't the addictive kind that are going to cause some potential bad behaviors towards the end of those. But we have always opportunities for access because that's part of what we do here. We have a grant writer on staff now because obviously budget is a huge concern, and we want to remove all of the barriers. So we have a grant writer on staff that helps schools and engages them with our work. And reach out. hello@empowerededucator.com is always the best way to get in touch with me.
Yeah, I spent some time on your website over the last couple of days, and as a guy who comes from a web design business before I got into radio again, awesome website, by the way, but I thought that the assessment there that you guys, the form you can fill out, I thought that was a pretty cool setup. I kind of went through the questions and took a look at that. Didn't want to send it in, so you were like, who the hell is this guy? But I thought
it's
that was great. And that's something that anybody in that school system can fill that out, and it probably would encourage anyone in there to fill that out.
Yeah, that retention assessment is a great tool because retention is something that is, we know the teachers are leaving the profession. There was something just came out in the Washington Post recently that said last school year there was a 40% deficit in teacher positions. Like there weren't enough teachers that were covering classes. And that's insane. So again, we can't look at retention and solve the retention problem. We need to focus on the inputs. And that teacher retention assessment that's right up there on the homepage, that's for anybody to take. I highly encourage anybody to take that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a huge piece. And honestly, just like Jen said, go wade through the website, guys. If you're on your prep hour and you're catching this or whatever, just go spend some time there. You're going to read some things that are going to give you a little empowerment right off the bat. You're just going to catch some things there that will strike some chords with you that you'll be like, man, if nothing else, grab one of those nuggets, like our little bit about those breathing breaks, and put that into application straight away. And if you're in the teacher's lounge and you're having your moment and your hands on your heart, somebody comes over and goes, are you having a heart attack? And you just say, no, I'm trying to remember the Pledge of Allegiance. Whatever it takes to get them to leave you alone. Take a little time. Get your self time in, because that's so important. Because we need teachers. We need teachers. You secure society. Okay, we would not have civilization if it was not taught. And so it is so key to have our teachers at the top of their game. And we, here on Teacher Appreciation Day, can't say enough about how much we appreciate how much the teachers pour into the classroom and pour into our kids. I love, and I still, and my mom, it's been 9 years since she passed and probably closer to 15 or 20 since she taught, but I still will run into adults that was your mom so-and-so? And, oh, she was one of my favorites. She'd give me a great teacher story. And to know that, that legacy she built with them is continued on is huge. And to hear my kids come home and, oh, I had this teacher, he helped me out with this today or whatever it might be, to hear those good teacher stories and getting to see that action in our schools. We are not without hope. We have so many amazing teachers out there, but you amazing teachers that balance all this and make that magic happen, share the word with your other teachers that may be struggling. If this isn't necessarily applicable to you and you feel like you got all the rainbows in your fist, spread the word, share the love, tell them what you're doing to keep that balance,
Yeah. 100%. This is your legacy, and
Yep.
that lives on forever. You never know who you're going to touch along the way. It's generations. It's beautiful.
Yep. Jen's website is empowerededucator.com. Again, we strongly encourage you, visit the website, spend a little time there, peruse through it. You're on social media as well, correct?
I am. Yep. Jen Rafferty _ which is on Instagram. And if you take a look at Empowered Educator Faculty Room, that's a really cool place that we hang out on Facebook.
Nice. Awesome. We'll definitely check it out. Jen Rafferty, thank you so much again for being a part of my Humans in Tune conversation today on Teacher Appreciation Day.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Awesome. That has been another Humans in Tune segment here for 93.9 Mike FM. For Jen, I am Darren. Appreciate you guys hanging out, whether you're streaming it online on Facebook or listening on the podcast. Heads up, we got another Humans in Tune segment coming at you this Thursday. We're going to be chatting with our friends from Cardin Circus, and I'm going to have an interview that I will probably run out of time doing with Israel Alvarado, who has a great circus story, and we're going to dig in on that on Thursday at 11 a.m. on Mike FM. Again, for Jen, this is Darren. Thank you for tuning in for another Humans in Tune segment on 93.9 Mike FM.
Thanks for catching this Humans in Tune conversation with 93.9 Mike FM. Find previous interviews on our Facebook page, or you can listen via our podcast at 939mikefm.com.